You know, after spending more than 40 years on this bench, I've come to realize that a courtroom isn't just a hall of judgment. It's a mirror. A mirror that shows the struggles people try so desperately to hide from the world. We see them when safety nets have vanished, when the last coin has been spent, and when dignity is all they have left. And occasionally, a case appears that brings you to your knees. Not because of the crime committed, but because of the raw humanity standing right in front of you. Before I dive into this story, and trust me, it's one that will make you hold your loved ones a little closer tonight, do me a favor, hit subscribe and drop in the comments where you're watching from. I read your stories constantly, and they remind me why we do this work. It clears throat. Was a Tuesday morning in Providence, the kind of gray, misty day that seems to seep into your bones. I arrived at the courthouse early, around 8 a.m. That quiet hour before the session begins is sacred. I sat in my chambers with my coffee, always black, and reviewed the docket for the day. My father used to say, "Frank, never forget where you came from. The person before you could be a neighbor, a cousin, even a friend." That advice echoes in my mind every morning. As I scanned the files, one caught my attention. A simple parking violation. Overtime meter. The fine was routine. Nothing that would usually make a judge pause. But I've learned paper is deceptive. Paper doesn't show the shaking hands of a widow. Paper doesn't reveal an empty fridge at home. It only displays a code, a number, a penalty. But then I saw the age, 82 years old. I made a mental note. Listen carefully today, Frank. Christina called the court to order. The room was fuller than usual, a sea of faces silently hoping for a break, a second chance. We went through the routine, speeding tickets, red lights, minor infractions. And then Christina called out, "Mrs. Evelyn Miller." I looked up and saw her slowly rise from the backbench. She steadied herself for a moment. Small, frail, wearing a coat that looked decades old but was clearly cared for with meticulous attention. Her hair, silver and neatly pulled back. But what struck me most was her walk. Hesitant, not guilty, just terrified. She approached the podium, gripping a worn leather purse with both hands, knuckles white. She looked as if she wished she could vanish. I've seen hardened criminals walk up there with more confidence. This woman seemed like she had never broken a rule in her life. I leaned forward, wanting to break the barrier of the bench immediately. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," I said, keeping my voice as gentle as possible. "Step up to the microphone. Take your time." She looked at me, eyes already glossy, fighting back tears before we had even started. Adjusting the microphone, her hands visibly shaking, she whispered, "Good morning, Your Honor." I asked how she was. Simple question, but in my courtroom, it's diagnostic. She hesitated. Took a deep breath, fighting to maintain the dignity my father always spoke of. "I'm doing the best I can, Your Honor," she said, the weight of those words pressing down on me. I read the ticket. "Mrs. Miller, you're charged with parking at an expired meter on the Street. Citation from 2 weeks ago. Do you understand the charge?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." No excuses, no defiance. That quiet acceptance worried me more than argument ever could. "Tell me what happened. Why were you there that day?" She looked down at her purse, fingers tracing its cracks. "I was at the pharmacy, Your Honor. My husband passed away last year. I have prescriptions I need. I thought I had enough coins. I moved as fast as I could." I watched her closely. "You were picking up medicine?" She nodded. "Yes. And when I came out, the ticket was on the windshield." She paused. Then looked at me with desperation that tore at my heart. "Your Honor, I live on a fixed income, Social Security. Every penny is counted before the month even begins." That was the moment the paper became a person. I asked the question that shifted everything. "Mrs. Miller, how much is the fine?" She glanced at the ticket, lip trembling. $40, Your Honor." I leaned in. "And if you pay this $40 today, what does that cost you? What will you go without?" She didn't answer immediately. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. She traced the worn leather of her purse, searching for an answer. Finally, in a whisper that carried to every corner, she said, "Your Honor, if I pay this fine, I won't have enough for food for the rest of the month." A chill ran down my spine. I asked to clarify. "Mrs. Miller, are you saying $40 is the difference between eating and going hungry?" She nodded, tears spilling freely. "I have $5 left, Your Honor. Until the first of the month, if I pay this. I honestly don't know what I'll do." I leaned back, removed my glasses, letting it sink in. In a world where people spend $5 on coffee without a thought, here was a woman who had likely spent a lifetime working, raising a family, contributing to society, now terrified because she was down to her last $5 and the system demanded $40 more. I glanced at Inspector Quinn. He avoided her gaze, affected. Even the officers at the door shifted uncomfortably. This is the reality I speak of. Law sees a code. I see a grandmother forced to choose between her heart medicine and a warm meal. "Mrs. Miller," I said gently, leaning forward, "do you have family to help you?" She shook her head. "My son lives in California. He has his own family, his own struggles. I never wanted to be a burden, Your Honor. He worries enough." That word, burden, breaks my heart. Seniors who built this country, now feeling like a burden over a $40 ticket. I thought of my own father, the milkman, rising at 4 a.m. in freezing cold so we'd have a warm breakfast. What if this were my mother, alone, counting pennies? The thought was unbearable. "When was your last proper meal?" I asked. She hesitated. "Some toast and tea this morning. And before that, silence." That silence spoke louder than any objection I've ever heard. This wasn't about a ticket anymore. It was a systemic failure. Loneliness. A society that forgets those most in need. Dismissing the ticket wouldn't be enough. Banging the gavel and saying dismissed saves $40, but doesn't fill her fridge, doesn't fill the empty chair at her table, doesn't tell her she matters. Justice is about what you do for people, not just what you avoid doing to them. I leaned forward. "Mrs. Miller, hear me. You are not a burden. You are a valued citizen. In this courtroom, we do not let seniors go hungry. We do not let anyone suffer in silence." Her eyes widened, confusion and fear mingling. She braced for punishment, a lecture. But I had a different plan. I looked at Quinn. "Inspector, do we have anything in the fund?" He checked quickly. I wasn't talking about coins, I meant mobilizing the spirit of the courtroom. Energy shifted. People on their phones looked up. A woman sighing in the front row wiped her eyes. This was no longer a legal proceeding. It was a test of our humanity. I looked at Mrs. Miller. So small against the weight of the system. I thought of my mother, Philomena, who could stretch a dollar further than anyone. She taught me, the measure of life isn't in what you keep, but what you give away. "Frank, when you see suffering, don't look away. That is your test." And I realized I was being tested, not on statutes, but on my heart. "Mrs. Miller," I said softly, "I am dismissing this ticket. You do not owe the city of Providence $40. That debt is gone. It is wiped clean." I banged the gavel. The sound echoed through the courtroom, usually a signal of finality, but this time it felt more like a starting gun, because I wasn't finished. I held up a hand to stop her from turning away. Dismissing the ticket only resets you to zero, and zero doesn't buy groceries. Zero doesn't put milk and bread on your table tonight. I reached into the pocket of my robe, a habit I've developed over the years. Inside, a small stash, contributions from people around the world who watch our proceedings online and send in $5, $10, wanting to help. We call it the Philomena Fund, named after my mother. It's not city money. Not tax dollars. Just heart dollars. I pulled out a $50 bill. "Inspector Quinn," I said, holding it out, "please give this to Mrs. Miller. Tell her it's from the Philomena Fund, so she can go to the store on her way home and get what she needs." Quinn, normally stoic, smiled, a real warm smile. He took the bill and walked down the aisle to the podium. But before he could even hand it to her, something extraordinary happened. Something that still gives me goosebumps. I heard a rustling from the front row. It was the woman I mentioned earlier, the one who had been sighing, tapping her watch, clearly impatient that this story was taking up her time.
She stood.
Without asking, without waiting, she walked to the railing, opened her designer purse, pulled out a $20 bill, and gently placed it next to Mrs. Miller. Her face had softened completely. The annoyance was gone, replaced by something deeper, shame and compassion. "My mother is in a home in Florida," she said, voice shaking. "I haven't visited her in 6 months because I've been too busy. Watching you today, it woke me up. Please take this. Have a good dinner tonight." The room went silent. You could feel the air change, electric, alive. Then from the back, a young man stood. Hoodie, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He walked down the center aisle, dug into his pocket, and pulled out a crumpled $10 bill and a handful of quarters. "Judge," he said, looking up at me. "I'm here for a speeding ticket. I don't have much, but she needs this more than I do." He placed it next to the $20. Mrs. Miller froze. She looked from the money to me, then at the strangers surrounding her. Hands flew to her mouth to stifle a sob. She wasn't shaking from fear anymore, she was shaking from shock. Shock at being seen. Shock at unexpected kindness from people who, 5 minutes ago, had been impatient faces in a crowd. I looked around the room. "You see," I said, voice thick with emotion, "this is who we are. This is Providence. We don't kick people when they're down. We lift them up." Inspector Quinn collected the money from the railing, quickly counted it, and looked up. "Your Honor," he said quietly, so only I could hear, "there's nearly $200 here. $200. 5 minutes ago, Mrs. Miller worried about $5. Now she could buy groceries for a month, fill her gas tank, breathe a little easier." Quinn handed the stack to her. Her hands trembled so much she nearly dropped it. She looked at the money, then at me, then at the young man in the hoodie, now quietly staring at his sneakers as if he hadn't just done something remarkable. I can't take this," Mrs. Miller stammered. "It's too much. I didn't come here for charity. I just wanted to explain." I leaned into the microphone. "Mrs. Miller, this isn't charity. Charity is giving to someone below you. This is community. This is people standing beside you. Take it, not for yourself, but for us. Because letting us help you makes us all feel a little more human today." She clutched the money to her chest over her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you all. I will pray for every single one of you tonight." As she turned to leave, she stopped by the young man in the hoodie. He, rough around the edges, judged daily for how he looked up. She didn't speak, she just reached out and squeezed his hand. He nodded, a shy smile breaking through his tough exterior. That frail widow holding the hand of that young man. This is the justice I wish the world could see. It wasn't about the parking ticket anymore. It was about bridging gaps, between generations, between lives. Mrs. Miller walked out, head held high, steadier than when she came in. She knew she wasn't invisible. She knew her city had her back. After the heavy doors closed, silence remained. Normally, murmurs, paper shuffling, whispers filled the room. Not today. Respectful silence, the kind that comes when everyone realizes they've witnessed something sacred. I glanced at the docket. Next case waiting. But I couldn't just move on. Not yet. I removed my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. I looked at the young man in the hoodie. "Young man, stand up, please." He did, nervous again. "Yes, Your Honor. What are you here for today?" I asked. "Speeding, Your Honor. 35 in a 25 zone. I was late for work." His record was clean. No prior offenses. Just a kid rushing to a job, who had just given away what was probably his lunch money for a stranger. "You know," I said, "I often say you can't judge a book by its cover. People see a hoodie and make assumptions. But today, you showed us your heart." I picked up his file. "You gave $10 to Mrs. Miller. That was a fine thing." He shrugged, embarrassed. "It just felt right, Judge. She reminded me of my grandma." "Well," I said to Quinn with a knowing glance, "good karma has a way of coming back." The officer issued the ticket, But justice also considers character. I paused, holding his gaze. I'm going to dismiss your speeding ticket. A gasp swept the room. Laughter and applause rippled through. The young man smiled wide, genuine. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you so much. Don't thank me, I said. Thank your grandmother for raising a gentleman. Now go, and drive safely. As he walked out, high-fiving a stranger, I thought about balance. Mrs. Miller saved from hunger. A young man's goodness reinforced. 2 lives touched. $0 in fines collected. $1 million worth of hope dispensed. But the day wasn't over. Providence has a sense of humor. The next case, completely opposite. Christina called the name, Mr. Arthur Sterling. From the middle row, a man stood. Sharp suit, probably more expensive than Mrs. Miller's car. Checked his gold watch, sighed loudly, walked briskly to the podium. Didn't look at me, too busy on his phone. Good morning, Mr. Sterling, I said neutrally. Morning, he replied curtly. Let's make this quick, Your Honor. Lunch meeting in 20 minutes. The contrast was blinding. 10 minutes ago, a trembling widow. Now, a man treating court like a drive-through. Mr. Sterling, I said slowly, the court runs on its own time. You are charged with parking in a handicap zone without a permit. Correct? He rolled his eyes. Technically, yes. But I wasn't parking, Judge. I was idling. 2 minutes in a coffee shop. Engine running. Officer overreacted. So dramatic? I repeated. You blocked a space for someone with a disability for a latte? No one was there, he argued. I pay taxes. Contribute to the city. Why drag me down here for $100? He opened a thick leather wallet. How much is it? $100. $200. I'll pay cash. Let's just finish this. I looked at the money. Then thought of Mrs. Miller's $5. Silence returned, but it was different. Time. Before, it had been a silence of awe. Now, it was a silence of tension. The young man in the hoodie watched from the back, shaking his head. Inspector Quinn looked at me, jaw tight. Put your money away, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice dropping an octave. We don't do business that way here. He looked puzzled, as if the idea that money couldn't fix everything was foreign to him. Excuse me? I'm just trying to save us both time. I admit it, I pay the fine. What's the problem? The problem, I said, leaning forward, is that you don't understand what just happened in this room. You walked in during the previous case, didn't you? I was checking emails, he dismissed. I didn't pay attention to the old lady. That old lady, I said, voice rising just a fraction, has more dignity in her little finger than you've displayed in your entire expensive suit. She stood there, weeping over $40 because she refused to break a rule. You broke a rule that protects the most vulnerable members of society, and you think you can buy your way out of inconvenience? He let out a short, arrogant laugh. Judge, please. It's a parking ticket. Don't make it a moral crusade. I parked wrong. I pay. That's the transaction. It is not a transaction, I corrected him. It is a violation of the social contract. When you park in a handicap spot, you are saying your convenience is more important than someone else's necessity. You are saying you are above the rules because you can afford the penalty. I reviewed his record. 3 speeding tickets in the past year, 2 other parking violations. You treat fines like a fee to do whatever you want. He shrugged, adjusting his silk tie. It's the cost of doing business, Your Honor. I drive fast. I park where I need. I can afford it. I took a deep breath, thinking of my father. He used to say, Frank, money screams but wealth whispers. This man had money, but he was spiritually bankrupt. Mr. Sterling, I said, I have a lot of discretion in this courtroom. I can lower fines, dismiss them, or increase them if a defendant shows reckless disregard for the law. His smirk faltered for the first time. What are you saying? I'm saying, I continued, today, your money is no good here. Punishment must fit the person, not just the crime. For Mrs. Miller, $40 was a tragedy. For you, $100 is a joke.
I picked up my pen.
I am finding you guilty, but not just the standard amount. I am imposing the maximum penalty allowed by the statute. Firmly, $250 plus court costs. Sterling let out a sharp, incredulous laugh, shaking his head, looking around for an audience to share his outrage. $250?
Your Honor?
I make that in 20 minutes. Do you really think this teaches me a lesson? He pulled out $300 in bills and tossed them onto the defense table. They fluttered down, landing messily.
Keep the change, he sneered.
Put it in your little charity fund. The disrespect was palpable. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Inspector Quinn stepped forward, face stern, ready to intervene. I raised a hand. I didn't need a bailiff, I needed the truth. Inspector, leave the money there, I ordered. Slowly, I removed my glasses and looked Mr. Sterling in the eye. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking. Mr. Sterling, you seem to think that because you have money, you have power. He frowned, confused.
Excuse me.
I'm not talking about your bank account, I interrupted. I'm talking about your spirit. Your character. You stand there mocking a system that asks for a shred of consideration for others. You throw money at a problem as if it buys you the right to be unkind. I pointed to the empty chair where Mrs. Miller had Saturday. That woman offered us her dignity.
Her vulnerability.
She had $5 to her name and was richer than you will ever be. She understands community. Gratitude.
Humility.
Sterling shifted, no longer on his phone. For the first time, he looked small, uncomfortable. You said this fine is pocket change, I continued. And that's the tragedy. Where there is no consequence, there is no learning. But let me be clear, you are not buying your way out. You are paying a civil violation. But the court of public opinion, the eyes of everyone here, have already reached their verdict, and no amount of money can change that. I nodded to Quinn.
Process his payment.
Give him his receipt. And Mr. Sterling, take your change. We don't want a tip. We want a better human being. Quinn processed the transaction, handing the change back. Sterling took it, face flushing red, shoving the bills back into his wallet. Arrogance evaporated, replaced by sullen embarrassment. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that he couldn't intimidate this room. He turned to leave, walking fast, head down.
No strut this time. Escaping.
As the heavy doors closed, the room settled.
Heavy.
Like the calm after a storm. These moments drain you, not the legal arguments, but the emotional labor of opening a closed heart.
I looked at Christina.
She gave a small, sad smile. She sees this daily. The best and worst of humanity, separated by 10 minutes. I turned over my gavel in my hands. My father's voice returned, Frank, you can't save everyone, but you can speak the truth. I addressed the courtroom one last time before the break. You know, I said, today we saw two Americas. Mrs. Miller's America, people struggling silently but holding on to integrity. Mr. Sterling's America, success measured by what you can get away with. I sit here judging the law, but the real judgment isn't about parking tickets. It's about who we are when we think no one is watching. Mrs. Miller thought no one cared. Mr. Sterling thought no one could touch him.
Both were wrong.
I declared a recess and stepped back into my chambers. Heavy leather chair creaked as I leaned back. I stared at the black and white photo of my father, Antonio, the milkman, who woke before the sun to provide for us. He had little money, but abundant spirit. He said, Frank, how you treat someone who can do nothing for you shows your true character. Coffee gone cold, I replayed the morning in my mind. Mrs. Miller's trembling hands, Mr. Sterling's arrogance, the hoodie kid's grace. A microcosm of the world in 1 hour.
A soft knock.
Christina stepped in, files in hand, not setting them down. Her look said it all, you need to see this. Judge, she said softly, look at the hallway. Is everything okay? You should see it, she said, eyes misty. Mrs. Miller sat on the bench near the exit, organizing her purse. The young man in the hoodie hadn't left. He showed her pictures of his daughter. They laughed. Warmth spread through me. Two people from different worlds, an 80-year-old widow and a 20-something worker, bonded through shared humanity. There's more, Christina continued. The woman who gave $20 was there too, writing her phone number for Mrs. Miller. If you ever need a ride to the pharmacy, call me.
I mean it.
I wiped my glasses slowly. This is why we do it. The law can mandate behavior, but kindness?
Connection?
That must be chosen. And today, 3 strangers chose to be beautiful. What about Mr. Sterling?
I asked. Christina's expression hardened.
He stormed out, phone in hand, shouting about a meeting.
Let him go, I said.
He's trapped in a prison of his own making, and he doesn't know it. I looked at his $250 receipt. Then an idea struck, straight from my father. Christina, note this, the $250 from Mr. Sterling's fine. I want to match it from my personal fund to the Philomena fund.
She blinked.
You want to match his fine?
No, I said firmly. I want to purify it.
He threw money at us in anger. I want to turn it into a blessing. That money will help the next Mrs. Miller who walks through these doors.
Christina beamed.
I'll handle it, Judge.
She paused at the door.
Frank, today was a good day.
Yes, I replied.
Despite everything, it was. I walked to the window, looking out at Providence. Life rushing by. Somewhere, Mrs. Miller buying a warm meal. Somewhere, the young man driving more carefully. Somewhere, Mr. Sterling, richer in bank, poorer in soul. My job isn't just interpreting the law.
It's keeping the light on.
Even in bureaucracy, fines, codes, there's room for a heart to beat.
Afternoon session about to start.
Straightening my tie, robe on, I breathed deeply. More files, more stories, more people waiting. But before stepping back out, I wanted to say one thing to you, the person watching. I share this not because it's unique, but because it's the choice we face every day. Will we be Mrs. Miller, holding dignity when life is hard? The strangers in the gallery, stepping up? Or Mr. Sterling, blinded by success, thinking rules are for others? Courtrooms usually prove who is right or wrong. That Tuesday, it proved who we are. Mrs. Miller thought no one cared. Mr. Sterling thought no one could touch him.
Both wrong.
I think of Mrs. Miller's $5. Legally irrelevant. But enforcing the law would have broken her spirit. What justice is that? My father didn't leave a fortune. No real estate empire. He left wisdom. Never look down unless you're helping them up. So I ask you honestly in the comments, if you were in my chair, what would you have done with Mr. Sterling? Did I go too far with the maximum fine? Did emotion guide me, or was it the wake-up call he needed?
And Mrs. Miller?
Should the system allow exceptions for hardship?
Or should the law be absolute?
I read your comments every morning with coffee. Your debates, stories, support, it gives me hope. In a world that feels divided, this community proves compassion is alive and powerful. If this touched your heart, reminded you of your mother, grandmother, or a time a stranger helped you, hit like. Share this hope with someone struggling. Subscribe if you haven't.
Turn on notifications.
I have thousands of stories from 40 years on this bench. I want to share them all. We're building a reminder. No matter how dark the world gets, a little kindness lights an entire room. Thank you for watching, for listening.
Remember, you matter. Your story matters.
And as long as we look out for each other, we'll be okay.
I'm Frank Caprio.
God bless you all.